Cold case is a term that I don't really like because it brings the connotation that nobody's paying attention to it. It's never cold in that sense. It's just unsolved. Darlene Krashock's body, when I first saw it, looked so cold and so alone. When you're on call for homicide, the general line of communication is with the sergeant on scene. And I appreciated his dedication. He really wanted to do right by the victim. That sergeant happened to be Joe Kenda.
Well, my. I've seen many things, not many this extreme. She's active duty Army. We, of course, consider that the killer is probably military. We take blood, we take hair, we are at a dead end. The most important part of homicide investigation is to never, ever give up.
From the historic Haunted Heartland in Omaha, Nebraska, my name is Brian Corey, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this episode of the Necronomicast, the finest in creepy conversations. My guest this evening is a legend in American law enforcement, perhaps one of the most gifted crime fighters in history, Lieutenant Joe Kenda. As a 23-year veteran of the Colorado Springs Police Department, he solved an astonishing 92% of the homicide cases he's investigated. Today, he's featured on the television shows Homicide Hunter and American Detective. His new special, Never Give Up, recounting one of his most difficult cases, premieres this week on Investigation Discovery and Discovery Plus. So be prepared for a frank, no-holds-barred discussion with the Homicide Hunter, Joe Kenda. And now, ladies and gentlemen, for your listening pleasure, it is my honor to have on my show the great Lieutenant Joe Kenda, a law enforcement legend. Joe, once again, thank you for being on this program, and good evening, sir.
Oh, you're entirely welcome. Thanks for having me.
Having you on the program, I'm looking at my screen now, and there you are, just a legend in law enforcement. And I'm a big true crime buff, and have been for a long time. And to have someone with your expertise and your reputation and your command of law enforcement techniques and investigation techniques, man, I'm just so excited to have you on the program.
Well, thank you very much.
Joe, I was looking over your impressive resume, and you hear this a million times a day, but a 23-year veteran of the Colorado Springs Police Department, spent 21 years chasing killers as a homicide detective and a commander of the Major Crimes Unit. You and your team solved 356 of your 387 homicide cases, 92% success rate, unparalleled in law enforcement. I just got to ask you though, man, how many cigarettes and gallons of black coffee do you think you consumed?
8 or 9 million a week, I would think, probably somewhere in there. Yeah, of course, it's. I stopped smoking 12 years ago.
Well, congratulations.
But I used to eat them. I mean, I smoked all the time.
Oh, I'm sure.
The nature of it, you know.
Yeah.
I had a reporter once who told me very annoyingly, "Oh, you smoke." Because I lit a cigarette when I got out of a car at 2 a.m. And I said, "Honey, if you did what I did for a living, you'd be smoking cigars and you'd be inhaling them. Now get out of my way." And I went on about what I was doing.
Fantastic. You're known for your candor. You're known for your honesty and your truthfulness and putting things bluntly. I love the story about how after you retired and you were approached to do a television show, that you sat down and a producer hands you a script and you had nothing to do with that.
That's correct. In fact, I did it intentionally. I wanted to make him mad. And I said, what is this? Well, that's what you're going to say. I said, no, did anybody tell you I'm not an actor? I'm a policeman. I was there at this event. I remember it clearly. And I got over playing dress up when I was 5. You should have too. And that really made him mad. And I wanted to, because it annoyed me. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll talk to that camera for 15 minutes. And I'll tell you about this case. If you don't like what I say, then we'll talk about this. And he said, well, all right, because he's ready to be mad. He's ready to not like it. I spent 15 minutes. I said, well, and he said, we don't need that. Okay, fine. There's never been one since. I say whatever I like.
You could say whatever you like on this show too.
That's good because I'm going to anyway. So, it's
right.
It's all right.
Well, it's a show for adults. So if you've got some colorful descriptive language of any of your investigations or any of the perpetrators that you've dealt with over the years, you let it fly. If I need to
okay, I'll do that.
Now
I'll do that.
Good. I had the opportunity, the pleasure to get an advanced screening of your new show. It's kind of a return to form. It's called Homicide Hunter, Never Give Up. Now, you did Homicide Hunter for 9 seasons, and that was just a great show that you sat down and you narrated and kind of and described and chronicled your famous cases from Colorado Springs. And this is kind of a revisit to a case that was a cold case, one of your few cold cases. You just didn't have a solid real lead on while you were an active investigator, but they returned because of science advancements and whatnot to solve this case. And it's a fascinating show. It's very well put together. It's an hour and a half of just compelling, wonderful television. Now I know you retired from your show, but it must have been an easy decision to kind of come back and do this special for this case that was solved.
Oh, sure it was. It's an interesting tale. It allows people to understand a clear fact. The police do not forgive, and the police do not forget. And we are going to continue to work these cases because things change over time. People's attitudes, people fall out of love, new techniques come about in the scientific world that allows further examination of existing evidence. All sorts of reasons. There is no statute of limitations for homicide. If you're alive, we can prosecute you. And that's what our intent is. My solve rate was indicative of that, but it's also indicative of the fact that all I think about is the ones I didn't solve. You always think about them. You just do.
There's a great scene that's kind of reenacted, and you narrate it in this documentary, in this special that's coming out on August 17th. That it really struck me. There's a scene where you narrate how you come into your office area in the morning, and you stop at the cold case room, and you sit there, and you honestly, you kind of beat yourself up a little bit over the fact that you haven't solved this case, or these people are still looking, and these families are still looking for justice, and these perpetrators are still out there. But it really struck me that the name of the show is Never Give Up. And that morning, or every morning, you went to that cold case room and you looked at those files and you kind of made a solemn pledge that you were going to do your damnedest to catch these guys.
Of course. It's a very difficult thing to be faced with failure when you're so accustomed to being successful. And I would look at those books and I would think, what did you not do? What did you overlook? What question did you fail to ask? And you beat yourself up over it. You do. I have recurring nightmares because of what I did for a living. It's the price you pay for the work. And one of those nightmares that occurs is all my unsolved victims are sitting around a conference table in various stages of decay and decomposition and ask me, why didn't I help them? It's the stuff of nightmares, as they say.
Yeah, I've read that you've had these nightmares and you're haunted by the victims of this violence in your community, because this is your community. This is where you and your family live, and you serve with distinction and honor in the community. And it's probably hard not to take these things personally when these animals.
You
are
do.
out there.
I always did. If you kill one of my taxpayers, I take it personally.
So, and talking about it on these shows that you do, and with these interviews that you do, and it's a form of therapy, isn't it?
It is. No, it absolutely is. It absolutely is. It's been therapeutic for me. I feel way better all these years later than I ever did before I started this. I've said more to that camera than I've ever said to my wife. When this program first was on the air, we were watching it. It's a startling thing, by the way, to see yourself on television for the first time. It's your face that fills the screen. Oh my God, it's me. And then when I spoke, you never believe your voice sounds the way it does to you, to everyone else. You think your voice sounds the same to the world as it does to you, but it doesn't. And when I heard my recorded voice speak, I looked at my wife, Kathy, and I said, do I sound like that? She said, well, yeah, I've been married to you for 40 years. Of course you do sound like it. And that was startling as well. But as the case wore on, the program, she was looking at me instead of the TV. I said, what are you looking at? She said, I never knew you did that. No, you didn't. So, yes, it's been very therapeutic for me. And I think in the end, it's the main motivation that finally allowed me to stop Kathy from nagging me to death and call the people back and say, well, okay, we'll try this. Because initially I wasn't interested.
Yeah.
And Kathy has a PhD in nagging from a very good school. And it was obvious that peace in the family was on the table. So I called back. And one thing led to another. And here we are.
And here we are with this special that's coming out. Never Give Up. It's the case. It's just a nightmare of a case for a family, for a community, and for an investigator. That's the body of a 20-year-old active duty soldier, Darlene Krayshak. Is that it? Krayshak? Yeah.
Yeah, Krayshak.
And she's found dumped behind by a dumpster behind a restaurant, like a piece of trash, in a cold Colorado night, 1987. Just horrible. Victim of torture, sexual abuse, just a ghastly murder. And I believe it when you say it, that it was one of the worst that you have ever seen in your entire career.
That's correct. That is correct. And I've seen death by every means except a nuclear weapon. I've never seen that. But pick any other method. I've seen numerous examples, but very few as violent as this, and none this extreme.
One thing that struck me when I was watching it, when I watch true crime shows or read true crime books, I always try and not focus on the murderer. Well, a lot of true crime shows or books, they, like you'll pick up a book about Ted Bundy's crimes, and it's all about Ted. And I don't really, I really don't give a rat's rear end about him. I want to hear.
Exactly.
I want to hear about the victims. I want to hear about their families. I want to hear about the law enforcement officers that worked their tails off, that isolated themselves from their families, that isolated themselves just to work to get justice for these people. And this show, there is so much evidence. I was surprised that now they block a lot of it out, they censor it, but there's a lot of evidence that's shown on the show, like videotape of the crime scene. So there's some reenactments on the show, but I was struck by actually how much you're drawn into the world of the investigator with this show.
That was the point. We wanted to show that rather than reenactments, of which there are hardly any in this particular show, about really what it's like to be the investigator who's at the crime scene, because you're dealing with someone who's Mr. X. They're a ghost. They're a shadow in the night. And your job is to give them a first, middle, and last name and a date of birth and a face to go with it. It's incredibly difficult to do, which is why it's so gratifying when it works and so horrible when it doesn't.
Now, you're obviously the focus of the show because of your reputation and all the dedicated years of work that you put in. But what I thought was also nice about the show is that you spread the accolades around. You share the credit a lot, and you talk about like investigators like Charlie Green, who one of the evidence techs. You really talk about how important his work was and how important it was that you guys took all this evidence in 1987 when DNA was not, we started learning about DNA kind of with the O.J. Simpson trial, in mainstream America in the mid 90s. But in 1987, you guys had the forethought to collect and save all this evidence that you didn't know if you could use it now. You might be able to use it in the future. But I just thought that was really interesting how you guys compounded all that evidence and saved it and had enough of it for future testing, which lo and behold, led to the identity of this killer.
That was the key.
Yeah.
That was the key. But the thing about it is there's an old axiom in law enforcement. No one can move through a space without leaving evidence of their passing. It may be microscopic. It may be something that cannot be seen by the naked eye, but there's something there. Mm-hmm. So if there's something there, take it. Preserve it properly. It may be of some use. It may not be of some use. But why should we ignore it when the possibility exists that it can be meaningful?
So if you're lead investigator on a case like this, take me a little bit behind the scenes. Like, what is your role procedurally? Now, we talked about Charlie Green, who was collecting evidence and doing photographs, and you have a whole team and everything. Like, what does the lead investigator do? Do you call all the shots, or do you let them kind of?
I do. Yep. I do. And there's a method to the madness. Okay. In my case, I designed a crime scene response team, 3 detectives and me. That could be enlarged to 9 or however many you need, depending upon the size of the crime. But a basic response is 3 detectives: a crime scene detective, a suspect detective, and a victim detective. They each have specific jobs. I direct what I want them to do. They understand what they need to do. And we have a lead meeting every 4 hours. Oh. So then when they gather everybody together and say, okay, what do you know? What do you know? What do you know? What do you know? Now we all know what everybody knows. Many heads are better than one. No one detective ever solved a homicide. It's a group effort. The victim detective needs to tell me everything they can learn about this victim. What are their habits? Where do they work? Where do they get their dry cleaning done? Where do they buy their groceries? Where do they buy gas? Are they bisexual? Are they homosexual? Do they use drugs? Do they experiment with narcotics? Do they associate with people who buy, sell, or use narcotics? Do they have a secret life that maybe nobody knows about? Because somewhere in that circle of associates, the likelihood is great that they encountered someone who now makes them look like this. So that's the reason for the background. Give me a place to begin. Ex-husbands, fiancés, associates, coworkers, that sort of thing. The suspect detective, his mission, or hers, is to determine the possibilities of the identity of a suspect by whatever means available. Witnesses, evidence found at the scene, whatever it takes. The crime scene detective works closely with the evidence technician, or technicians, plural, to determine what is probably physical evidence of the event and what may not be physical evidence of the event, and supervises the gathering of it, the photographing of it, the videoing of it, and all things responsible for the scene. So that there is an orderly process of probing, which is what you're always doing. You're punching in the dark until somebody says, ouch. Then you shine a light on that person. Well, who might you be? And why are you distressed? I'm asking you about this murder. So that's the game. The difficulty arises when the perpetrator is a stranger. That is a very rare thing. Most people die at the hands of someone they have a relationship with. It could be financial. It could be romantic. It could be criminal. All kinds of things. But people need a motive to kill. Most people do, not everybody. So somewhere there's some sort of event that takes place that motivates anger, hatred, rage in the other person, and murder is the result. Stranger upon stranger is very rare. 2 or 3% of the murders in this country are stranger killing. they're almost impossible to resolve because there's no connection. No one knows this person. No one's ever seen this person. No one knows of any involvement of this individual. Nobody knows anything. So it's a complete loss. You run the wickets and you don't find what usually is found. Some associate who has a motivation. That's what makes homicide investigation so maddening, is maybe dealing with that. And we certainly were in this case.
Sure. I was watching this and I was kind of thinking about how things were different. Now, I was born in 1974. So 47 years old. I remember back when there were no cell phones. that was a thing. That was a thing, listeners. That was a thing. And before, commonplace security cameras and all this. I was just wondering, Sherlock Holmes, the fictional character, he had his magnifying glass. And now you have all this at your disposal with DNA and everything else. How is it? I don't mean this disrespectfully to law enforcement officers nowadays that are serving, but is it easier now with the science that's available? Do young detectives?
Well, you got to keep something in mind.
Yeah,
science doesn't kill people. People kill people.
Right.
Science can be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It can prove a case at some point. But how does one determine where this science is going to be applied? You need to develop a suspect. And how you do that is the same way it's always been done. You talk to people. You judge people. You pay attention to what they say and how they say it. Use the same skills involved today as was involved then. There are some aids today that didn't exist then. I distinctly recall I had a brick phone, the Motorola brick. You could talk to somebody on the far side of the moon. It's like 5 watts, came in a suitcase.
I remember it.
You plugged it into the cigarette lighter to charge it so the battery was up. And I put it on the hood of a police car in the 80s when nobody had one, because it was $10 a minute to use the phone.
Right.
And I took it out of the bag and I called my boss, and a reporter said, "What is that?" I said, "It's a phone." "Well, it's not connected to anything." Well, I said, "Well, it's called a cell phone." And they said, "Wow." And now every 8-year-old kid has 2 of them in his back pocket. One his parents gave him and one his parents don't know about. That's the difference.
Right. Right. I understand, like you still need a keen detective's mind when you're investigating these crimes. You mentioned it just a second ago, like when you're talking to people, what are the biggest, I don't know, earlier with the other people involved with true crime, I usually bring up the term bullshit detector, but what's like a tip or a trick that a detective will use to know that this guy's not on the level in any way?
It's very difficult to articulate that. It varies widely based on the target, who you're dealing with. Is he intelligent? How well educated is he? Has he been to college? Did he barely get out of high school? Has he not been to high school? Is he under the influence of something? Mm-hmm. All those sorts of questions have to be answered first before you can determine how to approach him as an adversary. You develop techniques in interrogation by trial and error. That's what I did. They haven't changed the training in interrogation since the 70s. It's all the same nonsense. Go with what works with your personality. Go what you find to be successful over time. Learn from your mistakes. You make a mistake, make a note. Don't do that. Don't say that to anybody because it doesn't go well. And eventually, after a few years of doing it, you get rather good at it. And one of the methods the method I always used was, I wanted this person to think I was confused and I was maybe not too bright, because a bad guy sees that as weakness, something they can exploit. So then they think, if I can get past this fool, I can get out of here. So you walk in an interrogation room, you drop papers on the floor, You can't find the paper that has his name on it. You tell him that. Who are you again? And you're looking through papers and you see how he reacts to that. And if his eyes narrow, he's already thinking, okay, this is somebody I can deal with. So then you say, I don't understand why you're even here. Oh, another thing of hope, right? This guy is so dumb, he doesn't even know why I got arrested. So maybe you could tell me what happened, but first, I advise you your rights because you don't have to talk to me. But he wants to talk to me. He don't want to talk to anybody else because I'm stupid and he thinks this is going to work to his favor. So yeah, sure, I'll sign that, you bet. So let's talk and let him talk. People suffer from diarrhea of the mouth. It's a common human trait. Let them talk, say nothing, and they'll tell you things they wouldn't tell their own mother. They will. So you let him do that. You carry on for a couple hours and let him, until he gets really comfortable. You watch him relax in the chair. He's got his arm over the back of the chair now. He's kicked back. He's very comfortable. You want to change that. So you say, well, you told me what happened, but I don't remember what you said, which of course is a lie. I remember every word you said. So then you say, well, could you tell me again? Of course, he can't tell you again because he lied the first time. He'll try to repeat. He'll try to repeat what he said, but he won't get it right. There'll be changes, subtle changes, but they'll be there. When he does that, you throw your notebook on the table until it makes a hell of a noise, and you say, so, my. 2 hours ago, you said this, and now you say this. Were you lying then? Are you lying now? Or maybe you're just a fucking liar. What do you think? And he immediately is thinking, boy, what happened to the other guy? Oh, he's gone. Detective Antichrist is here now. We're going to have a little different conversation. We're going to play a sophisticated game of tag. Let me see if I can touch you because you are it. Now you've taken him completely off balance. His whole plan just went out the window, and he doesn't have another one. So you look at his body language. What's he doing now? He's not relaxed. Now he's moved in the chair. He's facing the door because he wants out. He's bouncing a foot on the ground. He's doing all kinds of things to tell you, he knows. He knows. Now, confessions are rare. Confessions are rare. They really are. You get statements that are meaningful, some implied involvement, that sort of thing. People always minimize what they do. They do. They just want to say, well, he threw himself in my knife 12 times. It was a terrible attack. Yes, isn't that interesting? Yeah. All sorts of things like that. But it is still a statement that he cannot escape from. He's been advised of his rights, and now he's made incriminating statements. He has not confessed, because that is, as I say, very rare. Sometimes people do, but they require a conscience to do that, and most bad guys don't have one. It's all about preservation. So if I minimize what I did, I'll be punished less for what I obviously did do. That's the theory in their pea-sized brain, of course, but that's what they do.
I noticed on the show when you guys, or when they finally found a suspect through DNA, and they brought this gentleman in for questioning, and you sit him down, and he's like, what is this all about? I have no idea what this is all about. And then slowly the evidence kind of comes out. And then you, like you said, like his demeanor changed. He shifted in his seat. He sits differently. He's obviously, the ego disappears and the nerves start taking over. And he is,
of course,
to say that this man was uncomfortable in the presence of the detectives and their questioning is an understatement. And like, yeah,
Yeah,
like
no
you
kidding.
said, like it's just like you said, like with the sexual assault, there was DNA deposited, and he, tried to explain it away like, well, I have sex with, sex with a lot of girls back then, and that doesn't mean I
Mhm.
killed her and everything, but just seeing the ego get stripped away was very interesting. It was
Oh, yeah, of course.
it was remarkable. Have you ever sat across, I'm sure you've sat across perpetrators that are dumb as a box of rocks,
Yes,
and it's no question how or why they got picked up, because they're just stupid.
of course. Idiots.
Have you ever sat across a perpetrator that you're just like, wow, this guy is cunning or just deceptive? Like,
Oh, yes, absolutely.
absolute
Sure.
monster.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, yes. And it's a very interesting experience. I once had a guy that in interrogation who was listening to me list all the reasons why we're going to convict him of this crime. And he's picking a piece of lint off of his blue jeans. He's not the least bit disturbed because he has no emotions. He's only capable of anger. He doesn't feel sympathy, empathy, guilt. He doesn't feel any of that. He's sociopathic.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't bother him that you're going to tell him you're going to do all this because nothing about him cares. It's humans are interesting. I don't understand them, but they interest me. It's human nature. And human nature has to be considered because you cannot reason with it. You cannot legislate against it. You cannot pray for it. You can do nothing. Human nature is what it is. If you are not like me, you're taller than me, you're shorter than me, you speak a different language than I speak, you're a different color than I am, I hate you because you are different. People don't want equality. They want equality in their favor. That's human nature. You have to understand that if you're going to deal with these people, how they think and why they operate in the manner that they do. Think of this. Consider yourself on a Serengeti plain, millions of years ago in Central Africa, and before you is the animal kingdom. And you notice this creature, 4 feet tall, covered in hair, walks erect, is surrounded by other creatures similar in appearance, and they grunt at each other in some sort of a language that they seem to understand. And you realize you're looking at early man. And then you observe that he is able to make weapons and use them to kill animals 3 or 4 times his size. And while you admire this clever little creature, you must keep something in mind. You should not try to pet him. It is not in your interest to do that. And guess what? It still isn't.
Humans are the real monsters.
Of course. The most dangerous animal on this planet. That's why wild animals run from us. They know what we are.
And you've seen the absolute worst. Now, I've read that you've never shot your firearm at a perpetrator.
Correct.
But you've pulled your gun out
20,000 times. And I would point that weapon. I'd point the weapon and I'd say, and very calmly and I would never raise my voice. Say, my name is Kenda with the police department. You're under arrest for first-degree murder. If you don't do what I say, I'm going to kill you right here and right now. And I've had guys with guns in their waistband raise their hands. Because if you don't raise your voice, they know you mean it. And I did mean it. But because I meant it, I never had to do it. Not that I wouldn't have. So therefore, I didn't.
Before you officially retired, did you ever seriously contemplate it before, you came to the decision? Was there ever a case that just kind of, man, or was the mission of police
No, it came almost all at once. It came all at once. It was everything around me became white noise. I wasn't hearing anyone. I wasn't seeing anything. I had reached my emotional limit, and I knew it. And I walked in my office and I typed a one-liner on an interoffice memorandum. They call it a blue sheet. In my IBM Selectric 2, you remember those from back in the day.
Right.
And I said, as of September 1st, 1996, I'm retired from the police department. And that was the end of it. I didn't have a retirement ceremony. I was there on Friday and I wasn't there on Monday. I didn't want the stale coffee and the insincere remarks and the really bad cake that they bought from Walmart. So I just left. Never been back.
People get a lot of they really find you entertaining on television because of your candor, which comes a lot from your, you got a dry wit, and it comes just from seeing it all and doing it all. Is humor like a coping or survival mechanism for a law person?
Sure, you can cry or you can laugh.
Mm-hmm.
Crying gets very old very quickly. And when I was a headless body of a female, the body's there, no head to be found. So one of my guys says, "Hey, Lieutenant, what do you think the cause of death is?" Well, I'm not a doctor, but it seems like we don't seem to have Oliver here. We're searching a house at 2:00 in the morning for a human head. We're looking under the cushions on the sofas, we're moving the pillows. One of my guys is in the kitchen. And he says, "Oh, God damn." And I walked in there, I said, "What?" He said, "Look." And her head was in the crisper tray in the refrigerator. Well, maybe he was going to make a salad. The guy who killed her was her husband, and he was having a psychotic episode. He was out of contact with reality. Completely. He was so filled with anger. He killed her and beheaded her and didn't know he did that. And he said to us right after, they had him under arrest at the scene. He said, "I think I really hurt her this time." Yeah, that'd be a fair statement. Except society is unwilling to accept your apology. So the state's going to pay your rent for the rest of your life. That's how it goes.
So this special that you've got coming out on August 17th, it's part of, it's 3 planned specials going back to Homicide Hunter. Is that right?
Well, there's always some things in the works, but I don't discuss that because I'm not sure what that is. That's above my pay grade, as they say.
I hear you.
So I know I have one on the 17th because I've seen it. So that I'm quite sure of.
I've seen it too. It's real. It's a real thing.
It's pretty good too, I thought.
I'm curious if, since you're such an icon, do other detectives reach out to you personally? Just like
they do.
Are you an active mentor to police officers now?
As often as I can be, yes, I am. Mm-hmm. Yes, I am. I've spent a lot of time doing that. It's only fair. If I can offer some advice that they might find to be helpful, I'd be happy to. Most of the time, they don't need advice. They need encouragement. Because this can be very frustrating work. And if they get lost along the way, nothing is working. They're overwhelmed by that. And they want somebody to reassure them that they've done the right things. And they have. It just hasn't been successful yet. It doesn't mean it won't be. But that's the worst of this kind of work, is you go do things that you think look so good, and all of a sudden they're so bad. And they go through your fingers like sand. And you got to start over. Well, it wasn't him, was it? No. And on to the next. On to the next. And sometimes they just need to be reminded of that. That, hey, it's not over yet. Not over. You'll find them. Just a matter of knocking on the correct door.
When you're watching television and a person like me who has no law enforcement background, heck, I haven't even been arrested, so I have no law enforcement background.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm proud of that. Sure,
I'd emphasize that on my resume. By the way, I've never been arrested. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, thank you.
I'm host, producer, and never a convict. So.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So when I'm watching this, and most people, we're watching a show and we expect it to be solved within the 42 minutes of the television program.
Of course.
So
that worked that way.
What I liked about your show too, it shows you guys tracking down leads, and there was like 2 or 3 on this murder case that's on this Never Give Up special. You go down 2 or 3 leads, and each one looks pretty promising. I mean, there's a little bit there, and there's a little bit there. There's enough to keep sniffing around, and then it comes down to something like bite marks. The teeth don't match. And then you're like, man,
sure.
So that's got to be frustrating. Like when you think you got the guy.
It's maddening. It's absolutely maddening.
Yeah.
I used to think about this a lot because it helped me sometimes. I had a little old lady. She was in her 80s at the time, who was just lonely and crazy, garden variety crazy, but crazy. And every time a murder was reported in the newspaper, she would take the bus, come to police headquarters, come up to homicide to confess to the killing. Oh. So I would sit her down in front of a word processor and tell her when she did that, I had to have details before I could arrest her. So she'd have to type and explain the reason she's responsible. She'd sit there all day and randomly strike keys. It'd just be a gibberish, continuous line of numbers and commas and letters. And my guys would bring her a cup of tea every once in a while. She always made sure to be there after the buses closed at 6:00 in the evening. City buses at that time stopped running. I'd have one of my detectives take her home. And the next time there was a murder, she'd be back to confess again. And it's just part of the routine. And she finally passed away. We kind of missed her.
Yeah.
But you got to remember that there are people that will confess to crimes they didn't commit. And I've had that happen, where people come in to confess to the crime. And it's nothing that they say is possibly true. They want attention. They want, who knows what they want. Maybe they don't know either, but it happens. It's all part of that game of having to decide which guy is the magic out of this group. There's always a group of guys. Which one is the one?
Final question for you. And honestly, this has been so much fun. I looked up at the clock and I'm like, that's got to be wrong. That's got to be wrong. What do you wish that people that aren't in law enforcement knew about your job in law enforcement?
People need to understand something. There are detectives all over this country, in small towns, in county sheriff's departments, in big cities, that investigate homicides for little or no money. They suffer the slings and arrows of the press and the public for the sole purpose of standing in the shoes of the victim and protecting their interest because they can no longer do so. And that's why I sponsor and have this new show called American Detective, which it premieres, in fact, a new episode tonight, Wednesday, to show that, to showcase the fact that I'm not the Lone Ranger. There are many, many policemen who do this work because it's the right thing to do. It's something called integrity, which we have seemed to have lost sight of in this country. People are now motivated only by themselves, by money, by taking selfies of themselves when they're on vacation, and that sort of me behavior. This isn't that way in law enforcement. We're going to protect you. Even if maybe you're not the nicest person in the world, and even if somebody isn't going to miss you, nobody gets to play God. That's the deal. And when you raise your right hand and you take an oath, that's what it means. You've taken an oath to serve and protect. And that's what we do.
And people like Joe Kenda are out there. They're always watching, and they never give up.
That is true.
Joe Kenda, it has been an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show. I respect law enforcement. I respect you greatly. Homicide Hunter, what a show! American Detective, I love it. You're also an author. You've written 2 books. I have one of them, Killer Triggers, and
there's a third one in the pipeline too that'll come out next summer.
Oh yeah, good. I'm glad to hear it. And for you to take this time, your legendary career, to appear on my show and to talk with me and give me insight into your world, just a brief, just a peek through the blinds. It's been really something else. I can't thank you enough for your time. I wish you continued happiness and success in your retirement. I hope you're enjoying your family, and I hope you're doing. I hope you're doing everything your wife says. Your new chief.
Oh, I always have done that. Oh yeah, it's part of a happy marriage. Happy wife, happy life.
I hear you, Joe. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time. I wish you, like I said, continued success, and I hope someday those nightmares just kind of go away and you have peaceful sleep.
I doubt that, but that's okay. It's the price you pay for the work, and I didn't get drafted. I volunteered. Thanks for having me.
Joe, thanks. Have a great night. Thank you so much.
You too. Bye-bye.
Well, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Lieutenant Joe Kenda on Necronomicast. If I never do another episode of Necronomicast in my life, I'll be okay, because I just interviewed Joe Kenda. Probably one of the greatest law enforcement officers in the history of American law enforcement. And it's all for you. Next up on the Necronomicast, episode 232. The author of The Last Master Outlaw. The man behind the new Netflix documentary, D.B. Cooper, Where Are You? Thomas Colbert is my guest. Fresh from his appearances on Coast to Coast AM, Thomas is going to sit down with me and talk about one of the greatest American true crime mysteries of all time, the mystery of D.B. Cooper. I've been waiting a long time for this. So there we go. A little bit more true crime for you. Got a lot of surprises heading your way on further installments of Necronomicast. So leave those comments, leave those reviews. Thank you for your listenership. Everybody, take care. Have a great night. Get some sleep.